Hi everybody, my name is Liana Yurka and I'm the Assistant Park Manager at Walnut Creek Wetland Park with the City of Raleigh's Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Resources Division. I'm excited that you've joined me today because we're getting ready to talk all about seeds. It's a really great time of year to be talking about seeds because they are exceptionally busy getting ready to sprout into the next plant. Seeds come packaged in a tiny container ready to grow into the next plant, ready to sprout. They have the next generation of roots and leaves and some nutrients to get them started. However, not all seeds come in the same shape or size. They're perfectly adapted to the tree or shrub or plant that they're going to grow into, and some of those adaptations include how they get to the ground. So some trees, like the black walnut tree, have really large, heavy seeds. These seeds work because they fall from the top of the tree directly into the soil and don't really get caught up in the branches on the way down. Here's an example of a black walnut seed. You can see that this seed is rather large. It is about the size of a pit from a peach or a little bit bigger. And just like those peach pits, they're kind of rough and striated. They have kind of ridges all the way up and down the sides of this pit or this seed. The seed is intentionally hard and rough so that something can't bite into it and get to the inside, which is where the seed is contained. That's where all the nutrients for the seed to grow are. Black walnuts generally will drop their seeds. They're really large and fleshy, and that fleshy part is kind of green to begin with and turns black, and they will drop those from their trees early in the fall and around October. That fleshy part will start to kind of rot off and will help to fertilize the soil where this seed has landed. After a while, the seed will grow into the next generation of a walnut tree. Another tree that uses that same kind of gravity technique, but a little bit smaller, are our oak trees. Now, Raleigh is a city of oaks, so I wanted to make sure we highlighted how important oak trees are and how cool their seeds are. Oak trees do have what scientists call a nut. Just like the walnut and a hickory, those are all nuts. But you and I, we commonly call oak trees' nuts acorns. Acorns are distinguished by a little cap on the top of their seed, and a lot of times they'll have a little nub at the bottom here, you can see. That is where the acorn grew out of a flower. And then some acorns, when you find them, even have a little stem on top of their little cap, and that is where the acorn would have attached to a twig or the branch of an oak tree. Now, all oak trees tend to have acorns. Some acorns are bigger than others. These two are from a white oak tree right here in my own yard, which are especially yummy acorns for wildlife like deer and our rodents, so like our squirrels really love them. Now, not all trees make big seeds. Not all of them want gravity to pull their seed down to the ground. Some trees go the exact opposite, and they make really small, lightweight seeds that the wind can help to disperse. A really cool example that you might think of that you and I have seen often are dandelions. If you've ever seen those white, puffy flowers of a dandelion puff, that is how they disperse their seeds. If you watch the wind, or maybe you, if you pick it up and you blow on it, the wind will disperse those seeds. Well, some trees do that just the same with slightly different looking seeds. One excellent example of this are our red maple trees. Red maples have very small seeds that are dispersed or spread by wind. Their seeds look like this. These are really thin, skinny, tiny seeds with a feathery looking apparatus right here on the top. This part is really used for wind dispersal because when the wind catches this, these seeds will helicopter down to the ground. The actual seed part of this is this bottom part here. This tiny end is the only part that has the nutrients for this to grow into the next generation of a maple tree. But the wind picks this up and they will flutter to the ground, which is a really unique way that trees can help spread their seeds without spending too much energy growing a very large seed like our oaks and walnuts do. Another approach that trees and plants use is to kind of cram their seeds all together into one container or one device. We think of this like, you know, getting a ton of tiny little things together in one package. So one tree that is really common that you might see if you come out and visit Walnut Creek Wetland Park, or maybe a nature preserve or area near you, is the sweet gum tree. Sweet gum trees are frequently found near or around water, and this is what their seed structure looks like. Now a lot of people ask, what the heck is this? Because you wouldn't think that this is where seeds come from. This itself is not a seed. The seeds are contained in those little crevices, those tiny holes inside of this little sweet gum ball. The little spikies help protect the sweet gum seeds from animals chewing on it too much. You wouldn't want to stick something spiky like this in your mouth. But the extra air holes that are contained in there, that's where the seeds will hide. Those air holes are also really useful because sweet gum balls then get to float really easily. They have lots of air pockets. So this will fall on the surface of the water of a creek or a stream, or maybe even a pond nearby, and they float very, very well. So a lot of times you'll find sweet gums, the trees are growing on the banks or the edges of those bodies of water, because once it hits some soil, it'll just stay there and out will grow a tree from some of these seeds. So that's a pretty neat approach for getting a bunch of tiny seeds into one tiny package. Another tree that does this really effectively is the state tree. If you don't remember your 4th grade history, the state tree is the pine tree. Now there's a few different species of pine trees in North Carolina, and all pine trees kind of approach how they package their seeds in a similar way, and that is by using a pine cone. Pine cones are a way for a pine tree to hide their seeds. Here I have a longleaf pine cone that is still closed up. This might not be how you see pine cones all the time, because a lot of times they're opened up. But I wanted to show you that this is where the seeds are tucked in between all of the little spikies on the pine cone. And then once the pine cone does open up, this might be more like what you're used to seeing, the seeds will come out of those crevices or those holes, and that is how this pine tree will protect its seeds. It puts lots of spikies all around it until it hits the ground and the conditions are just right for this cone to open up and those seeds to disperse. Very few animals can get into this pine cone once it's closed up, but that's how it really helps protect it. So I mentioned this is my longleaf pine cone that's closed up, and here I have one that has opened up completely. So you can tell these are gigantic pine cones that grow in a really special part of the state in the Sandhills, or the southeastern corner of North Carolina. The other pine cone I showed you, this one might be more familiar. This is our loblolly pine. We see these all around Raleigh. They're very common and a beautiful tree. And then here in my own backyard, I have a white pine that grows really unique pine cones that are really pretty as well. So these come from our evergreen trees, and they are a really good approach for protecting their seeds. So now that we have learned a little bit about how trees or plants may provide seeds to the ground and how they protect them and get them from the top of their tree to the bottom, you and I are going to do an activity together about trying to grow some seeds and seeing just how they have all of the things they need inside of them to grow into the next generation. Hang tight, I'm going to get my materials, you can go get the supplies that you need, and we will work together on making our area ready to sprout some new plants. Are you guys ready for our activity? We're going to do a really quick experiment with some seeds to see what we can get to sprout and what we can get to grow. All the stuff that you will need are things that you should readily have in your house. Everything that I'm using I had in my kitchen or in my pantry. There might be some things that you might have to get at the store. I hope that's not the case, and hopefully you have some of these already on hand. So for this experiment, you're going to need some paper towels. You need any type of paper towel will work. My paper towel comes in about this size sheets, and this is perfect. Take about 3 of those pieces of paper towel and layer them flat on top of each other. You will also need some kind of zip top bag. This is a small sandwich sized zip top bag. You can use that size. You can use something a tiny bit smaller if you have that. Or if you don't have any bags, you can use a small plastic container with a lid that closes tight on it. You'll need some water. Any kind of water will do. This is just tap water. You can use bottled water if that's what you have. It doesn't really matter what water you have as long as you use a little bit. And you don't need very much, maybe a 1/4 cup total. And then the most important part are some kind of bean. Dried kidney beans, black eyed peas, soybeans, any of those will work. I happen to not have any actual beans on hand, but I do have chickpeas, so I am growing my chickpeas in a baggie, and I'll show you how we do that. So you can use any kind of bean, but they have to be dried. They don't have to be in a bag. You can go to the store and get them in a container. A lot of stores have them that way, just as long as they're not canned. No canned beans, because of the way they're processed, it will not work for this experiment. If you don't want to go to the store and you don't have any beans, but you do have things like pumpkin seeds or anything that you might want to grow in a garden, like I have tomato seeds or zucchini seeds, you can plant those as well, and that will work just fine. If you happen to be eating a tomato and you want to save those seeds, we can plant those too. You just want to get them out of the tomato before you do that. So we're going to use these chickpeas in this case, or your beans, and what you're going to do, you're going to take that paper towel and you want to layer that 2 or 3 pieces on top of each other, and then you will fold that paper towel all together this way so that I have it like a nice square, and in that square is where you're going to lay down a few of your beans. You want to lay them, doesn't matter if they're in a pretty row or if they're touching, doesn't really matter to me, shouldn't matter to the beans. And then you will fold it again, kind of making like a little pouch for your bean in half this way. Once you have done that and your beans are inside your little pouch, you fold it all up, and then you want to stick it inside of your little Ziploc bag or inside of your container. If you are using a container instead of a bag, you just want it to lay flat as possible, so that the beans have a nice surface to lay on, like this, right? So my bean is in here. And then take the water that you have, just a little bit, not very much, and soak the paper towel. You want all of the layers to be wet. You don't want any dry spots, and you want that water to be able to get to the bean. It doesn't have to be a puddle in there. You really don't want to send your beans into a swimming pool or make them go floating around in the bag or container. You just want it to be thoroughly wet all the way through. So here I have my experiment from a couple days ago. I started this 48 hours ago. And so once you have wet all of your paper towel, everything is nice and wet. The really great part is this experiment means just letting the patients take over and just sitting it aside and not checking on it very much. So I stuck my bag of beans in my desk drawer. You can put them in your desk drawer, your nightstand. You can even put them in your dresser. If you have a kitchen cabinet that you want to use, you can stick them in a drawer in your kitchen or in your cabinet. Just let somebody know so they don't accidentally throw your beans away. Every 24 hours or so, you can check on your beans. You don't want to do it too often because you don't want to mess with a tiny little plant that might be growing in there. I check mine in the morning when I wake up. I want to see who's growing, who's doing what. So I just pull my kind of soaky wet paper towel out of here, and I open it up and I ask my beans, hey, like, what's going on? Is anybody growing? And I'm always really curious to see who's progressed. So the day when I checked it a few minutes ago, I found this really cool sprout coming out of my bean. So this is the early root for some beans, and a few more that just have little tiny growths little tiny roots coming out of them. So I started soaking 8 beans, or 8 chickpeas, and out of those 8, I have 4 that are growing. So about half of my beans are sprouting, which is great. Those other 4 may or may not grow with us, and that is okay. they don't grow, no big deal. So I check them and then I close it back up, make sure that the paper towels are staying wet, and if I need to soak it a little bit more, put a little more water in there, no big deal. Stick it back in the drawer and let it sit for another 24 hours. You're gonna do this for 7 to 10 days to see how much root growth you're gonna get, maybe if it starts to split open a little bit. After about 7 days, you can decide if you want to plant your little sprouts. Stick them in some soil. If you have an extra container, I use old yogurt cups a lot for growing things in my yard, starting seeds out. So any container will do. You can stick some dirt in there from your yard or your neighbor's yard, or if you have potting soil, that works great. And then just let your beans grow. See what grows out of it. And hopefully you'll get a few little plants that you can keep watering and taking care of that are growing from something that you have right here in your own home. All right. Well, I thank you for joining me and trying this experiment. Let's see what we can get together. You can share pictures of what you're growing with us. We would love to see it. And we hope to see you all back at our park sometime very soon. Take care.